Good morning, Sean here, Mountains Garage. A week ago I was standing here in almost 3 feet of snow. Now it's all gone. What a crazy year. 55 degrees for a couple of days. We got many inches of rain. I guess I got my green Christmas. But we're not here to talk about the weather. Let's talk about the 71 Nova. It's time to mark out for the shifter hole. And in doing so, I uncovered more mysteries. I mean, the car would be 50 years old this coming year. You gotta expect it's gone through some situations. My only knowledge of it is that it came from California, and when I saw it listed in California, it had a 421 small block, a 204R, and a 10-bolt rear end that had been beefed up, had aluminum cover on it, girdle, I guess. I next found it in New Hampshire. Now it had a original 307 TH350 single track 10-bolt. And with a little prying, long story short, I also bought the 421. The 204R was missing, and the beefed up 10-bolt. The 204R was missing because the night the guy that bought it in New Hampshire got it off the truck, he took it for a spin, and in his words, the tail housing exploded. And drive shaft came out of it. And then when he woke up in the morning and saw the horrible left rear quarter patch job, he was not happy with the car, and that started the path to where I own it now. Just took a few months. The 204R is a neat little transmission, good for cruising, hot rods, etc. Dimensionally identical to a short shaft Turbo 400. The mount placement and overall length, it needs a different slip yoke, but it bolts in place. I have the crossmember that was in the 71, the burnt orange car, from the 204R that was in there. I should be able to use it in the 72 if I use small block engine stands that center the engine in the chassis. A factory Turbo 400 crossmember would take into account the engines moved over with the big block mounts to the right, and so are the holes for the transmission mount. You can make it all work, but not while we're here again. So I've spent plenty of time underneath the Nova, and I can see where there's extra seam sealer around this floor brace on both sides. And I assume that's, where the drive shaft came apart and he just tried to touch it up. No big deal. I mean, the floors in this thing are spectacular. But I had noticed, because I've had this for a few years, I've never pulled the seat or carpet out of it, but there was a few oddities. I can't really get the camera up there, but the red cable is from the B&M shifter that's bolted to the floor. It's a B&M, I think it's Quicksilver. It acts like a regular shifter from park to drive, and then it ratchets below that, but it is for an overdrive transmission. So it was hooked to the 204R for sure. The cable comes down through a nice neat hole, but there was never any bolts or screws sticking through the floor. How did they do that? But while we're under here, to locate the shifter hole, I measured, and a Super T10 and a Muncie, this whole upper hole here is the same dimension back from the bell housing. So I went straight up from there and marked it and drilled a hole up through the floorboard. That's going to be the center of my hole, because that pretty much coincides with the center of the shifter. So this is the actual Richmond T10 I'm going to use. And again, this is the same hole right here. And I made a cardboard template that from the inside of the car, I can just line up against the hole I drilled through the floor and lay it out. I measured all the likely shifter candidates. This is a Hearst Speedway shifter, and it's actually slightly big for it. This is a long vertical gate, and it barely fits, but it does fit, so it could share the same hole. And my goal was to stay inside the opening that a Super Boot could cover, because I have one or two of them. So I unbolted the seat and flipped it out of the way, pulled out the front carpet, and I found this water seam sealer. Obviously he was spooging up the top of it. I don't know if it actually penetrated the floor. It didn't look like it did, but no big deal. I'll just paint over that. But the shifter itself, something this guy didn't do, this is done in California when it had the 204R, is welded to the floor. And there's this other patch on the wrong side if it was ever a standard transmission, which it wasn't, near as I can tell. But this thing's been raced a lot. It had, let's say, it had a 421 small block that made quite a bit of power. It's probably seen lots of horrors. Never went fast enough to need a cage, but who knows? So I took the same hole that I drilled up through the floor and laid my pattern out. And I'll whack a big hole in it and not have to worry a bit about, sacrificing this beautiful car. I'm joking. It's just an old car. But like I said in the beginning, these things are 50 years old or more, depending on what car you're looking at. I would never trust anything unless it was super documented as being original. These things have been through hell. They were never intended to last this long, probably, and still be, a viable option. I don't know what their plan was back when they built cars, but planned obsolescence was definitely factored in. Every time I watch the auction shows, the cars look fantastic. They have the underbody cam, but you can hide so much stuff. And from years of working on other people's hot rod stuff, most of it's done wrong or different than you would do it. Not necessarily wrong, sometimes definitely wrong. It's just a whole lot of mysteries hidden in there. Let the buyer beware. If you're okay with that, that's cool. I would never want a super original, documented, you can't do anything to it car. To me, that's not my jam. Some people would take it and put it in a museum, and I'm glad people do that. This 71 is too nice. I went too far. I wish it was primer. That's where the fun is. It took me this long in my life. I'm mid-50s. I finally figured it out. I always wanted something that was perfect. That's just a pain in the butt. A couple of videos back, I was installing the clutch, and I was talking about wanting to place the clutch fork as far forward in the window as possible, as practical, so you get plenty of room for it to stroke. And also on early Camaro and Nova, there should be a little dent right here to give you enough clearance to do that. If you don't have that, just whack it with a hammer a little bit. It's right under the very edge of the throttle pedal where your foot doesn't go anyway. It's a non-critical area, but it gives the fork plenty of travel room. The factory clutch pivot ball for the Z-bar is screwed into the block. On a truck, it's actually in that hole up there, so they provide you with this bracket that Lakewood does. You could easily make a bracket off there to pick up your Z-bar if you were LS swapping using this particular bell housing. The Scatter Shield bell housing I have in the Model A doesn't have that bracket. It's a different brand. And this is a stock aluminum bell housing. They sell this bracket if you're LS swapping. It bolts on and picks up your Z-bar. Accomplishes the same thing. Pretty cool. If you're LS swapping. I'm not. I was just laying under the car and that bracket made me think of it. Well, I'm not LS swapping today anyway. I'm going to cut the floor out with your traditional whiz wheel. This is a right angle one. It kind of takes the place of what they call the death wheel, is what you see all over the internet. People kick the shroud off this and put a 4-inch blade. It is super efficient for removing sheet metal, but I see people doing regular fab with it, and I really just don't want to expose myself to that flying wheel all the time. At least this gives you protection. This will accomplish the same thing. Even this with the shield on it would be better, but I have run on an electric one the 4-inch death wheel, and it is super. If I was cutting all the interior structure out of like to build a drag car, it does work really well, and I'd shield up and do it. Just not my jam. People can do whatever they want. Me, I'll just stand behind the shield. Save a trip to the hospital. I was walking back up to the house for a second. You can see the ice there, but you can't see it here. Black ice, they call it. Almost went down, but I saved it. Wasn't pretty. It's the next day now. Yesterday, I cut my hole and removed the automatic shifter that was welded to the floor, and went ahead and installed the actual transmission I'm going to use, so I can dimple the floor a little bit for the 3/4 rod. That gets pretty close. The 1-2 clears, but I'll probably give it a little more clearance too. When you're on straight rods, you got to offset them a little bit. So, and this hole here needs to go back that way a little bit and that way a little bit more. So I will pull the transmission out, do some more cutting. I don't want to, it's nice and clean. I don't want to get that debris all over it. And I'm not totally happy with my clutch fork. I got another one I'm going to make and see if I can improve it. Typical Lakewood scatter shield. This is open here more. This one was actually run with the Corvette style fork. I have quite a mess going because I've been trying on shifters. But back to the fork. This is the Corvette fork. It has more of a distinct curve. It actually has a 3/8 hole in it. So I'm going to open up that V so my rod can go that way. And I'm going to cut it off and weld it to this one because this head is good. This one, the springs wore out. So I'm going to whack them both in half, weld them together, and get the paint drying so I can try it out. Before I cut the old one in half, I measured its overall length and approximate angle. See how much I was gaining. I wanted to gain a little bit right there. I milled it out from my rod end. Just needs a little paint now. Well, I'm out of time for today, and this video is getting long for what it is. So I'm going to finish it up. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.